Is why I come to be the person I am now.
Do you believe we came from nothing, or do you believe we came from chance? Because you seem to be leaning towards the Big Bang, so it'll be interesting to see.
I don't know about chance. I just think we came to be because of the conditions that the universe created, such that we could exist. If that makes sense. It's like the idea that the Earth is a perfect place and a perfect situation for the sun, which is true. But you could also argue that life develops here because we are perfectly situated for the sun. It's not the horse before the cart, it's the cart before the horse, if that makes sense.
Interesting. What about in terms of your morality? Where do you get your morality from?
Human well-being. Yeah, so I would say that what is moral is that which is not deleterious to your well-being. And you can bring animals into this as well. So, like for example, I've got rabbits at home. Nice. I don't want to see anyone kill my rabbits. Yes. I would have words with them if they did, believe me. But that which is not deleterious to you or any of these people is, in my opinion, morality. We don't need to get that from a book.
And if two people differ, how do you know which morality to go with?
That which is better for human beings.
And who decides?
You don't need to decide. So, for example, this gentleman here, should we cut his leg off? You say yes, I say no. I think we'd all agree not cutting his leg off is better for him. So we won't cut his leg off.
But if the person's got diabetes and the only chance of survival is to get rid of the leg,
in medical situations, yes, but then he'd be.
But do you see?
Then he'd be willing towards that, yes.
So I just wanted to get a kind of understanding of where you stand generally. So correct me if I'm wrong. I would say when pondering about the universe, we have a few options about how it came to be or how we came to be.
Oh heavens, yes.
Yeah.
Because we don't know. We hypothesize, but we don't know. We've got no idea. It's such a confusing conversation and such a confusing situation. Nobody really knows.
When you say, what's your criteria for knowing something?
That which science at least helps to demonstrate to be correct.
Science, yeah? That's your yardstick?
Yeah.
Any other yardsticks?
Just science I'll have. Okay.
So what I will argue is science itself is very limited by its nature.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And
because it's only limited by science's ability to gather data. Because science is data, and we can only prove that which we can see. And that's what science is, the demonstration of knowledge in the real world.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, I agree with you. In fact, if you look at the philosophy of science, science by its nature is morphing, it's changing, it's evolving, ironically.
Yes.
So what I would argue is that even in our day-to-day life, Ian, we don't solely rely on science as the yardstick. Let me give you an example. Most of what you have learnt, or most of what you take and absorb, is actually done through testimony. Would you agree with me on that? Or would you like me to elaborate?
No, I understand exactly what you mean. And for most people, when you ask that question, they would say yes. I would say no, I am actually based on science because I do like a little bit of science.
Okay.
So it's fair to say that it's based on science.
Okay, let me just backtrack a little bit.
Please do.
Let's just say when we go to school or when we are at home. I would say 9 times out of 10. In fact, I would even go to 9.9 times out of 10. We don't get a chance to do the actual experiment ourselves. We don't get to read the primary source material. We don't get to excavate. We don't get to dig. We don't get to carbon date. That's only restricted for a handful of people in society. The rest of us have to go through testimony. Yes, it will be different levels of testimony, but testimony nevertheless. Would you at least agree with that?
I would agree with that wholeheartedly, and I'd also put a caveat on that, which is that I went through Christian schooling all the way till I was 16, and when I was at school I was taught that Jesus Christ was real. There was no question about it. Jesus is real. When I got older, I started to question and thought, not so sure about this. That's where I am. So just because you taught something at school doesn't mean, and it's like anything in life, just because you told something, don't accept it, have a look for yourself. What is the most logical explanation for the thing you're being told? critical thinking.
So you, as a man of science, you've agreed that 99.9% of your information is actually testimony, yeah?
Well, you're making those figures up.
Well, we can go with any figure. The reason why I say that, Ian, is because let's just say I can back that figure up. When's the last time you excavated and carbon dated something?
Oh, about 2 weeks ago I was in New Mexico digging up fossils of a velociraptor. It was a tricky... No, seriously. No, I haven't done that, thanks to the applause. No, I haven't done, but it's fair to say... Yeah, we know these things are done, and you can go and see digs and bits and pieces. I haven't done it personally.
I'm not denying that. Yeah. What I'm saying is, I agree with you. There is a level of trust, and I would say it's based upon logic, rationality, and common sense, without which, Ian, our society couldn't function properly.
You wouldn't have those shoes.
I probably would still. Nothing's going to stop these shoes from coming on this speech.
They're great.
Oh, thanks, Ian. But Ian, what I'm trying to say is, even with regards to experimentation, even studies, you hear studies that 4 out of 5 women have been sexually harassed in the UK. It's done by a YouGov poll. You're not going to go around and say, okay, that was the sample size. I'm going to go out, because we actually can't. So what we'll do is we look at the source and we'll say, is that reliable or not? And then if we think, in our opinion and our limited understanding, is reliable to us, subjective, we'll take it.
Have you ever watched a program called Yes, Prime Minister?
I'm aware of it.
Okay, so
yeah.
there's a specific scene in Yes, Prime Minister whereby they ask for a poll to be done on people's opinions of national service. And depending on the way they ask the questions, somebody can't help but say, yes, I believe in the national service.
Yeah.
And then they ask another lot of questions and say, well, I can't possibly believe in national service. Never trust any government statistics in any way, because they're all nonsense.
So when you hear a study, Ian, I'm sure you, because you're a man of science, these studies that you hear of, how do you determine if they're correct or not?
By looking at who's done the study, where the data's coming from, who the people were, fundamentally who's doing it. If it's a BBC, it's going to be massively to the left. If it's Telegraph, it's going to be to the right. But it's interesting nonetheless.
So testimony, yeah?
Testimony in so much as what somebody says about something, yeah. But yeah. I can have testimony that I've seen a UFO land on the common today. It didn't, but I can still have testimony that it did.
Yeah, exactly. So reliable testimony.
No, there's nothing reliable about testimony.
It's like you just said, when a study comes forward, you look at who's done the study, where it's coming from. You said yourself, the BBC, it's on the left.
Yep.
You'll have The Guardian on the right. You'll have another newspaper.
Guardian's on the left, Telegraph on the right.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. It's flipped from the camera, isn't it?
Right.
So in that sense, the point rests on this premise that you are not doing it yourself. You are relying on either a website, you're relying on someone mentioning something about the author, you're relying on something that somebody has said about the newspaper. It comes down to testimony, but different levels of testimony.
It does, yes, but it also comes down to demonstrable testing. Like, for example, I can't find, I'm just hunting down here for a stone, I can't find what's all leaves. If I were to drop a stone now, it'll drop at 9.81 metres per second. It'll hit the ground, because that's physics. I don't need to take anyone's opinion on it. That's a fact.
Have you ever done that?
Yes.
You've measured the speed?
Yes. Believe it or not, I've actually dropped a stone off the Leaning Tower of Pisa and timed it, and it works out perfectly with 2 VAT equations. It does work. So when you've got physics that works, where else do we need to go?
But my point still remains, which is we can do, I would say, a small amount of experimentation, but on the whole, and I would stick with my over 99% number, because we, Ian, don't have the time, we don't have the resources. In fact, a lot of this scientific equipment is very expensive. Not everybody is able to go to Italy, even though these shoes are Italian as well. Not everybody is able to be like us, you know.
Yep.
So in that sense, Ian, I think the point still remains, and it's a safe assumption to make, that testimony is needed for our society to run. And I would add another caveat as well. I would say where testimony isn't, even logically, for example, you hear now sirens.
Yes.
You are now inferring to the best explanation that has to be one of the emergency services.
Yes, I agree.
You're not doing a scientific experiment.
Nope.
You're not relying on testimony.
Nope.
You're relying on rationality.
Exactly, yes.
So Ian, what I would say is, that's why I wanted to determine initially, what's your yardstick for determining truth? And I would argue that for us to come to, I wouldn't even say truth, because I mean different people interpret that in different ways, just the same as science does, which is the inference to the best explanation. Yeah. So I would say when constructing an argument, I will not only rely on empiricism, I will rely on testimony, I will rely on rationality, ontology, all of these things, philosophy, in order to scaffold the argument. And then, Ian, you take the inference to the best explanation. That's all I'm saying. And that's up to us where we kind of leave and depart. But what I would say is, if we are to be intellectually honest, even in our daily life, Ian, if I was to say, how have we come to be? There are three options. Either it was by chance, or we came from nothing, or we were created. Now, which of these three seems likely? Now, the one that, if we were to be honest, in fact, let me pose it to you. What do you think is the most likely out of these? Is there another option?
Given what we know, the most likely thing is we are here by complete freak chance. And there's a reason for that, because there's no evidence for anything else.
We'll come to the evidence. Don't worry, there's plenty of time for evidence. And there's different layers of evidence. Yeah. So when you look at chance now, Ian, that's why we're saying that in our daily life, we don't take those odds. If there was a child that came and said, Ian, Dad, and you're like, I'm in the middle of a conversation. No, you're my dad. First thing you would do is
look after the child.
No, the first thing you do is he lying or is he telling the truth? You determine that, isn't it?
No, my first thing would be to look after the child. If a child came to me, the first thing I'd do would be to say, you're all right.
In this current climate?
No, the first thing I'd do would look after the child. That is the responsibility of a parent. The first thing you do is look after the child.
So bear in mind,
doesn't matter whose child it is. I hope no one thinks I'm trying to pinch anyone's kids.
That's the problem.
I'll look after the child.
But that's the problem, though. If a child comes,
I don't see that as a problem.
If children sometimes play pranks, they do certain things.
Yeah.
And if you've taken a child to the side, and there's police there, or somebody notices something and says something, that could be issues for you. I mean, I've been a teacher for quite a while, and if it's a child's word against yours, they're taking the child's word.
Chair of governors in a primary school, mate.
So you know better than me.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
But I'll still always protect the child.
Of course. I mean, he will be there, and you're not going to. Huh?
Or they.
Well, yeah,
or
yeah.
Any of those other words.
Yeah, exactly. So the point is, at that situation, if you do a DNA test, in that DNA test,
I see your point. Sorry.
Yeah.
We went off the tangent.
Yeah, no worries. It's fine. I mean, it's all well and good. So 80%, if they say, look, if that child is 80% plus is yours, or if they say, look, it's going 90% or even higher, 95%, but the chances 5% is not yours, what would you opt for?
What are my options?
Your options is either he's your child or either he's not your child. What's your conclusion from that DNA test?
Given my experience with my wife and life and 23 years of marriage, I would say there was something wrong with the test.
You did it again, and similar results.
And there's something wrong with the test.
And it happened again.
As much as sail as you want to put onto this test, I will say there was not enough wind.
Because normally what happens, Ian, in these DNA tests, there's a threshold. And
there's always a tolerance.
Exactly. And beyond that, you're given if for example, like you said, it's under a certain tolerance, they will say inconclusive.
Yes.
But when it's 85 or above, it's pretty conclusive.
Yeah.
So you're saying in an everyday situation, I would have to say, if you're being honest with yourself, Ian, in that situation, you would say it's highly likely that he's my child, And for me to turn him away and say, you're not my child, is unreasonable.
It is a hypothetical situation. Would I? There would have to be words between myself and my wife and the child, but any child I would look for the best in the child and do the best by the child. Let's put it like that.
That's fine. That's what you're saying. But I will stick with this point that in our daily life, for example, if we're crossing the road, now according to physics, a tree can pop out of existence and cause a big traffic issue.
Not like that. It can't.
According to quantum
might
physics,
take 100 years.
According to quantum physics, it's possible.
It's never happened demonstrably in our reality, so we'll put quantum physics on the side because there's so many problems with quantum physics. Neither of us are quantum physicists, I'm guessing. And I'm not a quantum physicist.
You've actually. I'm not either.
No. So let's put quantum physics in the park,
and
along with Schrodinger's cat.
That's brilliant. But you've actually proven my point. You've said, based on the probabilities, you will put aside science, and you will take what is, based on your experience. That's all I'm saying, Ian.
Let me flick it the other way around. You and I are about to cross that road. What's the first thing you do? Do you look for where the cars are coming and the bikes are coming, or do you pray?
I stop.
But would you pray and cross the road, or do you look for evidential science?
I do both.
Do you pray before every time you cross the road? Do you pray?
Depends what you mean by pray.
I don't know. I am not of your faith, I suspect.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm Christian from being.
No worries.
But if I was crossing the road,
I can elucidate that for you.
Never having done this before, I wouldn't say, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, may I be safe crossing the road, and then step out. I'd look. Taxi here, bits and pieces. I'd cross the road based on that which I can identify in the real world.
Let me clarify the differences between Christianity and Islam. This is an issue. Sometimes people force what's on Christianity onto Islam.
Jesus was a prophet. I've got.
Well, I mean, you know that, but that wasn't where I was going. In terms of prayer, the highest level of prayer in Islam is ihsan. To be ihsan is a stage in which you are aware of God, throughout your life, and that's the elite type of prayer.
And so, sorry to cut in.
No, go ahead.
How are you aware of God?
How are you?
At what point do you know I am aware of God? Because I don't know.
Are you aware of your existence?
As much as I'm standing here and talking to you, yes.
Are you aware of your existence all of the time?
Apart from when I'm absolutely nutsed out my skull drinking cider, but yeah, other than that, yeah.
But you're doubting your existence when you're drunk?
Yeah, that's a joke. I am reasonably happy that I do exist in this place. This isn't hard solipsism.
Yeah, that's good, because solipsists have big issues and big problems.
Exactly.
But the point that I'm trying to say, Ian, is when a person believes in Allah and has gone through the rituals and stuff like that, again, it's a training, and like I said, it's the end goal, ihsan. Not everybody is able to do it, but that's the end goal. And just like a person's aware of their existence, a person simultaneously links that understanding of their existence with the understanding of God, and that's how they transcend what's around them. And that's where I would say is the difference between being on the street and going, oh, Jesus, or this or that. I'm looking at you and I'm speaking with you, but I'm still remembering God. I'm talking about God, I'm remembering God. This is worship for me.
Yeah.
If I'm not harming people and I've come into this park with the intention that I'm just going to have nice conversations, talk about religion, that is worship for me. So even when I'm going and I have an intention that I'm crossing the road because I'm going to go home because my mom's called me home early because she wants to spend some time with me, that's worship.
Yeah.
So I put my hands together and go, oh, praise Jesus, praise this. That's why the concept of spirituality in Islam is, I would say, remarkably different. So when I'm crossing the road, I would do both things. And that's why even in my argumentation, Ian, I don't just take empiricism, I don't just take philosophy. I marry various forms of information and various subjects together to come to the inference to the best explanation.
And so which information is it that takes you to the conclusion that Islam is correct?
So it's a four...
I mean, that's a deep question, I do accept.
Yeah, no, I mean, we can go back and forth. So initially, what I would say is where we were, which was at the start. Once we proved that there is an existence, then we
There
proved...
is an existence, yes, agreed.
Brilliant. Then we acknowledge that that existence is a necessary being.
Sorry, the existence is a necessary being.
No. Again, because I'm trying to rush everything, let me just give you the four-pronged approach, then break it down, yeah?
I'll keep quiet.
Yeah, no worries. So there is existence.
Yes.
And you can't have an infinite regress of dependent things, and eventually you do need to have a necessary being. That necessary being has qualities. Then we go on to God. Then we go on to prophethood. Then we go on to scripture. And then when you marry all of these things together, then I come to the conclusion that Islam provides the best inference to the best explanation. What I've done at the moment, Ian, I haven't made the argument yet. You said how.
But in your second sentence, you inserted creation.
Right. But I also...
And we don't know that creation in any way took place.
I also inserted Islam as well. Which
Islam or Judaism or Christianity or Hinduism is irrelevant. You have to prove the creator or the God before you even start arguing about which religion is right.
And
there's
Ian,
a lot of religions.
Yeah, and Ian, we haven't even started doing that yet. You said, what's your reason? I've given you, like you look at the contents page. And in the contents page, you've got like 4 or 5 chapters.
Yep.
I've just told you the chapter heading, and now what we're going to do is we're going to look at each individual one. I haven't even made my argument yet.
Go for it.
But that was a short summary because you asked a very big question.
Oh, it's a big question.
Yeah, and I said, look, my answer is going to be predicated on 4 things, just so it's easy for you to follow.
Yeah.
So, there are 3 types of existences. An impossible existence.
It's got to be said, before you even start, you've just said there are 3 types of existences in your way of telling it. Once I've said it... I might disagree with you.
And you're more than welcome, Ian.
Nope.
Yeah, I'm going to say it, and then you're going to give your response.
And at the end of it, I'll say, yep, you've got it nailed.
Yeah, no worries. So, with these 3 types of existences, there's something that can't exist, which is known as an impossible existence. You have a dependent existence, and then you have an independent existence. Are there any other existences? Now the ball's in your court.
So you've got, it can't depend, it can't exist.
Impossible existence, like a squared circle.
Impossible existence, dependent existence,
and
independent existence.
Yes.
Right, so, well, straight away, let's take dependent existence, which would be a baby, which is dependent existence. If that baby wasn't fed, looked after, what have you, it would die.
Yes.
Independent. So how are you? What would in your word? What would categorize independent existence?
Right. So philosophically, not in terms of like what Leibniz and Aristotelian understanding of necessary being, it's pretty much threefold. So an independent existence is something that cannot cease to exist. It's not composed...
An independent being is something that cannot cease to exist.
Yes.
That doesn't make any sense.
It does. It means that it can't just stop existing.
All right, independent in that it has no requirement in any one of the physical states. All right, yeah, okay, I'll grant you that.
Yeah. It's not composed of parts. Yeah, and it can't be any other way.
Yep.
So that's the philosophical understanding of independent existence, and dependent existence is the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree that there are 3 types of existences, or do you think there's a 4th?
I would reclassify the whole lot, but I'd have to have some time to think about it. But I'll go with yours, just for good.
Right. you can't actually reclassify this, because this is the argument from dependence. So the definition and the way the argument is predicated is upon the notion of dependence and independence. So if you look in terms of dependence, because I'm not talking about cause and effect. Cause and effect is a different it's Kalam cosmological argument. That's
which we both agree is nonsense.
Well, it depends. So you have that there. So I'm arguing from dependence. So if you're arguing from dependence, so either something is dependent or it's independent.
Something either is dependent or is independent. Yes, correct. Yeah.
So everything that's around you, would you say that's dependent or independent?
I would say that every living thing is dependent on other things.
Even non-living things?
Well, non-living things, no. Because, for example, that bike will be there in 1,000 years if we don't do anything to it. So that's not dependent on.
But isn't the bike, because you said the word bike can only exist if a human being creates the bike.
Yes, that is true, but that's only the name I give it. The bike has no concern of what name I give it.
Has it been created?
It's been built by humans, yes.
Right, so it's dependent on a human being to create it, yeah?
Humans had to create that for it to exist, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, any other examples?
How many more do you want? I mean,
I just want you to be happy before we move on. I don't want you to say, I'll let you, because you know what happens then, Ian, is...
Things that are demonstrably created by humans are demonstrably created by humans.
Yeah, I would even say a tree, mountains, leaves.
Trees and mountains are definitely not created by humans.
Yeah, I didn't say they're created by humans. What I said is that they're still dependent. They're dependent on water. They're dependent on sunshine.
A mountain isn't dependent on... A mountain comes from plate tectonics. Doesn't come from water and what have you. But a tree does. A tree comes from water and nutrition and probably some dinosaurs down there somewhere. So, yeah.
So even a mountain comes from tectonic plates. It's dependent on two tectonic plates colliding with each other. So it's dependent on something.
A mountain is dependent on other things, yes.
Yeah. So we could go over many examples, but I'm sure you can see that everything around us is dependent. Now here's the claim, Ian. Here's the actual claim. You cannot have an infinite regress, and you're more than welcome to interrupt if you feel you don't understand anything, yeah? I'm not trying to patronize you, but I'd rather you understand it.
The word is patronize.
Yeah. That's what did I say?
Patronize.
Oh, well...
Sorry. It's a Jimmy Carr gag. It's an old one.
Didn't I say patronize?
You're right.
Okay, yeah, that's fine, no problem. So I'm not going to patronize you.
You're right, mate.
So there's not an infinite regress of dependent things.
No, there isn't. As long as it's reasoned through rationally and logically, I agree with you.
Now let me just end that point. You cannot have an infinite regress of dependent things. There has to be an independent thing at the end of that. Otherwise, to have an infinite regress...
You're inserting the independent thing. You straight away, you're going God of the gaps. You're putting something else in.
It's not God, by the way.
Doesn't matter what you're putting in there.
Yeah, I've just said...
Just because it's uncertain and we're not sure about it, there's no certain thing.
Okay, because there's two options, Ian. I'll tell you your two options, yeah? Either because we see everything around us, including us, we're dependent. Either we're dependent on something else, which is dependent on something else, which is dependent on something else. Ad infinitum, that's one option. Or the infinite regress of dependent things has to stop somewhere. And according to your understanding that you've acknowledged, the other option can only be independent being at the end of it. Which of the two is it?
The simplicity is, as natural beings, having evolved over the years, we are required and necessarily reliant on things that come from the past, be it our parents, be it our trees, be it whatever, and food and what have you. But there's nothing else other than evolution, where we are here, our reliance on things we need, and where we are now.
Okay, you've misunderstood what I've said.
No, I didn't.
Okay, the point that I'm trying to say, Ian, is what you've said is, I'll tell you why. You said we're reliant on evolution. Evolution is reliant upon matter and this and that. But the point still stands. If you carry on, Ian, that's dependent on that, that's dependent on that. Then philosophically and rationally, an infinite regress of dependent things means we cannot exist. Let me give you an analogy. if I am to throw a can, I ask the permission of someone else. He asks the permission of someone else. If that goes on ad infinitum, will I be able to throw that can?
It all comes back to the fact that we do exist.
But will I be able to throw that can?
You're taking me down a line.
I'll answer that. I'll answer that.
You can then throw your later point into it, and I get that. That's cool. Okay. So in the first instance, I say no, you can't throw the can because I'm not having litter and I don't like it.
Okay, Ian, I'm not taking you anywhere. You're more than welcome to stop in your tracks and refuse to go anywhere. Yeah. So I'm merely postulating options. We're exploring them together. If you disagree with anything, you're more than welcome to disagree. But what I'm saying is, I want you to really focus on what I'm saying. Don't worry about me taking you anywhere. You can leave the park, even if I have led you somewhere. It doesn't mean that I've committed you to anything.
No.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to formulate your own opinion. Yeah, no worries. So what I'm trying to say, Ian, coming back to this point is, if you have an infinite regress of dependent things, remember, Ian, remember existence. The first thing we acknowledge is that we exist. There's existence.
Yes.
Then we postulate that there's only three types of existences: independent, dependent, and impossible. Then we say, look at ourselves and look at what's around us and look at everything. These are all dependent things.
Yep.
Now we bring rationality and logic into it, and we say, look, if it goes ad infinitum, logically, we should not exist and we can only exist if that chain ends. And you made that point, but you misunderstood the point that you made. You hit the nail on the head. You said, but we do exist. The mere fact that you made that point that we do exist shows that chain has to end somewhere, philosophically, rationally, logically. However, there are two options.
No, it doesn't.
Think of these two options. Either it's ad infinitum, we can't exist. It has to. And that's why, Ian, even atheists, even I would say the modern atheists don't have an issue with the necessary being. That's why we're stuck on something which isn't very much disputed. Why? Because, Ian, you can't rationally, your life becomes a irrational existence, because what you're saying is, no, but we don't need an independent existence. Okay, then dependency goes ad infinitum. Okay, then we can't exist. It's a contradiction then.
Right. So what you're getting at is, it is irrational to have the concept that, in my stance, I have not been proved sufficiently that God exists, which is basically what we're getting to.
Sorry, say that again?
It is irrational for me to